Hey everybody, welcome back to my world. I'm Mike. We last left when I was getting ready to take the wheels and the fenders out for sandblasting. You saw kind of an awkward video with some bloopers in it that I shot, and I'm going to post here pretty soon, and haven't yet, but by the time you see this one I will have already posted it. Anyway, we got those back from blasting. They did a pretty good job for us. They cleaned all the rust and old paint off of the rims, and they even went over to the sidewalls of the tires and got all the old paint off. Kind of a helpful tip if you ever get into doing restoration work, especially anything with solid rubber tires that are difficult to replace. If there's paint and garbage on the tires, a little bit of glass beading will clean the tires very nicely and not cause any real damage, because the glass beads will knock the paint off but not damage the rubber. The rubber will still rebound under the pressure of a glass bead. So what we did is had them beaded, and then we got a brand new front tire. We were able to find one. There is one company in the United States we could find that made these, and I'll put the link to that company down in the description. Kind of a hard tire to find. So if you're going to restore an antique tricycle tractor like this case, take heart, the tires are still available here in the United States. So I took and sprayed a couple good heavy coats of a high build primer on these. It's actually a spray-on Bondo, and it really did a nice job. It filled, I would say, between 80 and 90% of the pits. Now I wanted to take these wheels to the point where they were flawless, but my father and my brother said, nah, that looks pretty good. Those are going to look nice. Let's just go ahead and primer and paint them. So after 2 coats of the high build primer and a lot of hand sanding on the part of myself and my brother, we got these to the point where I was ready to blow them off, tack them off, and shoot them in primer and paint. I'm not completely happy with how the paint turned out on these. I mean, for a piece of farm machinery, it looks pretty darn good, but there was a little bit of wrinkling that happened. The paint that I got was an industrial enamel, and the instructions for it simply tell you how to brush it on. They don't tell you how to spray it. So I was kind of left to my own devices on figuring out how to spray this paint. By the time I got it figured out, I realized I was working with 1 part thinner to 2 parts paint, and it would easily break into droplets and atomize well coming out of the gun. The problem was that I probably should have put the second coat on within a few hours of the first coat, rather than waiting till the very next day. That waiting till the next day caused some problems and caused a little bit of wrinkling in the paint. Most of it did lay back down pretty tightly, and it does not look bad. One of the saving graces of this paint, being an industrial enamel, is it's not as shiny as automotive paint is. I'm going to be honest with you, if I had used automotive paint, I could have got this to look just about like glass. But the problems with that are, first of all, it's a lot more expensive. Second of all, you have to also use automotive primers. Again, a lot more expensive. The beauty of it is that they give you all the instructions on how to spray it. How much thinner to add, how much harder to add, what your recoat times are and everything. This stuff here didn't give you that, even though it was a good name brand paint. It simply isn't meant to spray. Now, why do they do that? Well, I've got my theory on it, and my theory is simply this, that the EPA sticks their nose into every little thing, and if they have spraying instructions, they're going to fall into a different category of product, and they just don't want to get into the legislative hassle involved and all the bureaucratic red tape involved in producing this product as a sprayable product. so they don't give you any directions on how to spray this material. That's pretty much the way I see it. If I'm wrong on that, somebody please explain it to me, because that's the only reason I can see why you would produce a product and not give instructions on every method of application. The truth is that it sprayed nicely once I had it figured out. And like I said, I should have either put the 2 coats on the same night, or I should have waited 48 to 72 hours before applying the second coat. One of those 2 would have worked, maybe both of them would have worked. I don't know. I know that when I paint the tractor gray, I'm going to paint the primer one night, and then the next night I'm going to come back and I'm going to shoot both coats of gray in the same night and walk away from it for several days and leave the heat on in the shop. Well, I'm sure if you saw the first installment of this series that you'll see the tractor looks a lot different. It's still a dang mess, and it will be until we get a coat of primer on it and get it all into one color at least. But it is making progress. My brother, who got me started down this road, sadly has not been here nearly as much as he had first promised. And I've been very understanding about that. He has a family of his own, he has a job of his own, and he does have a side business to maintain. And I told him that it was important for him to get that side work done and make sure his customers were happy. So I sent him along so that he could do some of that work, and so he hasn't been here because he's been working. He hasn't been sitting on his butt. I want to make that clear. He has been working. Now, kind of the cool thing though, is my father has been coming over to help, and my dad has probably spent more time over here than my brother has at this point, which is really cool. My dad does work part-time. He's on 1 week, off 1 week, so he can only come over and help during the off weeks. And it also depends on how busy my mother makes him during that time that he's off, whether or not I get to see him. And he's been pretty busy. This is the week before Christmas, and I'm sure there's been a lot of running around and preparing for Christmas, because my dad has said, I don't know what's going on, but I know your mom's got something for me, so I won't be here, which is all good. So I've been over here working. Now, the other day, my dad was over, and we worked on the crank starting mechanism for the tractor. That it needed a little bit of attention, some machine tool work on it, and I helped him with that. So we repaired the nut that goes on the crankshaft nose, and the crank that is set in the bottom of the radiator has a pin through it. And my dad didn't have a very good source of pin material when he did it. He used a bolt, and unfortunately that bolt really didn't fit properly, and it wasn't a hard bolt, so it started bending. He put a 5/16 bolt in it. The hole is between 5/16 and 3/8, so using another bolt of that size wouldn't work. I looked around my collection of steel, didn't find anything, and finally I said, Dad, I've got some old grade 8 bolts here that are a little larger. Let's use it for steel stock, turn it down, and make a pin. So that's what he and I did real quick on the lathe and installed it in the crank. And it looks like everything's going to work well there now. When we started this project, I said, oh, it's just going to be a cosmetic restoration. Well, the truth is I wasn't really very involved in the work that went on this tractor before it came to my shop. And the truth is also that it's been a long time since that work was done, and I didn't remember what my father had told me about and what my brother had told me about. So, I was walking into this kind of blind. So we've had some machining work that needed done, and we've had some welding work that needed done, and it adds up. There's a lot of little details when you're working on something like this. You might look at it and say, oh, it'll take long to go over that whole tractor with a wire brush wheel, degrease it, and then shoot a coat of primer on it and shoot a coat of paint on it. And that's true. You can do that kind of work in 8 to 10 man hours, but we found things that needed fixed. The crank, I think my father and I spent a couple of hours working on that the other night. What else hasn't worked right? The steering brakes didn't work right. My brother started working on it. I helped him a little bit with it. We figured it out. And I think we got the steering brakes to where they're going to work better. Somebody had made some parts at some point in this tractor's past, and they just didn't quite fit right. So we had to make some little adjustments, you know, put them in the lathe and skin them off and put it back together and check it and do some other things. So that took some time. I'm in the process now of fixing the rear fenders. I want to get, listen to me, the rear fenders. This only has rear fenders. I'm fixing the back fenders on the tractor, the fenders on the tractor, and you know, they're 80-some-year-old fenders. They've been through the mill. They've had a tough, these fenders have had a rough life, and so they need work. They've been bent and stretched and have fatigue cracks in them and all kinds of problems that have to be addressed. And all of these take a lot of time.